Welcome everyone to the November conversation of the Historical Society of Old Abington. My name is Doug Ulwick. I'm the president of the Historical Society of Old Abington. We're meeting here today in the Dyer Memorial Library, our home base. And I'm going to start today's program the way we start all of our programs, with a salute to the flag. So if you would join me in that, and rise if you choose to, kneel if you chose to, whatever, however you feel is appropriate. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And I don't have to stand for this, but I'd also ask that we observe just a quick moment of silence, not just because Veterans Day is coming up, but Abington also lost a young police officer this week, Alex Kokoros, if I'm pronouncing the name right. Anyway, so if you just join me in a brief moment of silence with those thoughts in mind. Thank you. So the Historical Society of Old Abington has 6 conversations through the course of the year. We start out in October, November, December with our fall semester, if you will. And so this is our second meeting of the fall semester. We had started off with a program on Thomas Drew's, he was a photographer on the South Shore, and there was a new book by Les Molyneux. Today we're talking about the making of the documentary 21 Years of Folded Flag, and on December 2nd we will be talking about the St. Bridget Church history. They had a big anniversary a couple years ago. Normally we like to actually go to the church when we do one of those for a field trip, but they're doing baptisms that afternoon, so we'll be meeting here while they're doing their baptisms and talking about the history, but Bob Kelly will be joining us for that. Then we take a couple months off for the winter because invariably our meetings get canceled due to bad weather, so we just kind of said, we'll take January and February off. And in March, we have a meeting about local greenhouses and nurseries, and strangely, on April 7th, we'll be talking about the blizzard of 1978. A lot of us lived through that and have memories of it, and I'm very excited, particularly about May's program. We have Rick Wolf coming down from Canada to talk about the Lamson motorcycle that was actually made here in Abington in, I don't have the date here, I think 1903. And he has the only complete living example of that, and he has restored it. So he will come and show it to us, and we'll talk about the Lamson process in the factory, which was just down the street here on Center Ave. But it's literally a priceless machine that has been featured recently in the Antique Motorcycle magazine. So we're honored that he's making the trek from Canada to bring it home to Abington. So that should be an interesting program as well. Anyway, we survive on volunteers, so if you're interested in what we do, a membership is all of $12 a year, and a lifetime membership is all of $75 a year, and in the next room over we have a sign-up sheet. And forever, lifetime, yes, well, whatever works. And anyway, and we invite people to participate in all the programs that we do, and we have particular volunteer efforts both in cataloging and planning our programs like today's, and just simple stuff even like refreshments that we'll serve after today's presentation. So anyway, we encourage you to help us out and join in any way you can. So anyway, without further ado, today we are talking about a documentary, 21 Years of Folded Flag, and we have with us the producer, Rudy Childs, and I said Junior in this, and that's wrong, because we have Dad in the audience, but he has a different middle name, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, because Historical Society knows Dad, but okay. So this is a different middle name. We won't go into the middle name, what it is, and we also have Richard A. Fitz Jr., and this is very much a story of your life. And we're honored to have you here to talk about it today.
Thanks so much, sir. Appreciate it.
And anyway, so I think it's important to start at the beginning. I mean, some of us who grew up in town know the general story. Your dad was a Vietnam Green Beret,
Yes.
and he was missing in action, and he was at some point declared.
Well, to the general public, he was missing in action. The truth of the matter is that the unit he was involved with was so highly classified that we weren't allowed to know.
Okay.
It was a national security type of thing. So he was, when he was declared missing, it really came down to no body, no proof. It was standard. But they were operating in a neutral country. And that country politically was claiming that they were neutral and not involved with what was going on. However, that was not the case. The CIA, I'm going to paraphrase a lot of this, the CIA was kind of watching, monitoring what was going on, and they were allowing our enemies to supply themselves and whatnot by using routes that we all know, such as the Ho Chi Minh Trail, to supply our enemies, and they knew this. And early on, we tried to insert all American teams, and probably about 90%, if not more, the entire teams would end up disappearing. So it was CIA realized that they needed to intercept this with a much more skilled and larger operation, where they augmented at that time the unit called Mark VSOG. And that mostly was made up of 5th Group Special Forces, and it was also a joint operation where they had air assets and other things to use at their disposal. However, most of those assets weren't even told what was going on. They just said, go do this.
Go do that.
Yeah. We're not going to tell
they
you.
were in the dark about the bigger mission.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So, and that's kind of what happened is when he met his demise, that's pretty much why we weren't told the truth.
I was going to say understandably. No, it's not understandably, but
it depends how you look at it.
Yeah, when you understand a little bit of how government works and such, it's not understandable, but it's maybe standard operating procedure, perhaps, and a bad way to look at it. Now, this unfolded when you were very young.
I was 2 years old.
He met you. I mean,
I have. Well, it's funny that I have one memory of my father, even though I was 2 years old. And for many, many years, I did not know it was my father. I thought it was his father, Walter Sr., Walter. And it was down at Fort Bragg. And I remember asking my mother, this was after the funeral in 1990, if anybody remembers that big funeral here in Mass. And it was one of those kind of solemn evenings we were going through memories, and I said, I remember going off the Kitty Jump Tower at Fort Bragg. They had it was a 35-foot tower. That's where they, trained to learn how to do the airborne jumping. And I went off that tower, but again, I thought in my head, I could only see a adult male figure, and the whole time I thought it was his father, my grandfather.
Yeah.
And my mother looked at me cross-eyed and says, "That was your father."
Wow.
So that's the only memory I actually have.
Right.
But I was 2 years old.
Okay.
So from that point on, of course, in all that time to spend training,
Right.
How often is he around?
Obviously not much.
Right.
And this is a question kind of for both of you. How did your personal journey and your discovery turn into a documentary? I mean, that's what we're talking about today, is the making of it. But what was the impetus? How did it start? Was it just people telling you need to tell this story?
In not so many words, yes, and that's been going on for a long time. And especially right around 1990 when it was such a huge story.
Right.
However, what a lot of people don't know is early on, my mother had been back and forth through Washington along with my grandparents, and we're getting nowhere, which we do delve into in the story. But in '75, she asked the government to reopen the case and give her the best scenario, and that was a presumption of death. So in '75, we had a funeral then, and we literally, some reason somehow, that each side of the family just kind of split.
Oh wow.
And we didn't
tragedy can do funny things like that, though.
And as I've gone through this journey, I don't want to skip out on the questions.
All right. We'll come back to it.
Right. I found out that is a fairly common thing.
Yeah. I'm afraid it is.
Yeah, and so when I came back into it in '90, literally all this was thrown on my shoulders again. And so I felt quite sheepish about the whole experience, as far as I really had no clue what was going on, because it was completely opposite of what my life was. I just was not involved, really. So when you hear people say you got a good story and all that, there was something inside of me that said, for one, out of respect, you don't jump on this. And for two, it was something I felt, to give it its due respect, I really had to absorb it. I had to understand it and find out what I could for myself. And keep in mind, at the funeral in January 1990, it was still classified. So what we were getting was trickle-down information, a little here and a little there. And so that also gave me a challenge of meeting people that, you know, either knew my father, served with him, tried to talk with these people, and, you know, so it was this whole journey of mine to really grasp it.
Just the discovery.
And understand it.
The discovery.
And you don't, out of respect for anything, you don't jump on a story like that without really understanding it. Because, you know, there's people that probably wouldn't like that, but I wouldn't like it. I didn't think it was the right time. It would have been, to me, a shallow thing to do. But ever since, everybody's been telling me that. So years keep going down the road, and as you may know or understand, that I'm, as any child would be without a parent, they're going to continually ask questions, you know, and not know them. So you constantly ask the people that have this person in their life and to remember them. You're constantly asking them questions, along with my mother. In this case, a natural human thing is, as years go by, you tend not to remember everything. And there was that one time where I had said, out of, you know, I don't even remember what the question was, but it was something like, hey, Mom, didn't you say, you know, this about my dad, whatever it was. And she pondered for a minute and said, you know, I don't remember. And then I said, you know. So there came, years go by again, and now my son's looking at me in my eye, posing the same type of question. And now I'm posing the same type of answer. And I went, you know, maybe I should try to get some of this information gathered and at least collected. It necessarily wasn't, I should do a story. It wasn't I should do a documentary. It really wasn't, but it was always in the back of my head. And I suppose there's a few reasons, because I still don't think I really knew everything. But when I met Rudy, this is a crazy story, but
it's Rudy, really, it has to be a crazy story.
It's even crazier. But the whole premise was that, you know, I told him what was going on. I didn't necessarily talk to him necessarily about doing a story, but at least try to save some of this stuff. And as our early meetings went, kind of got more into that idea about doing this. And he really said, yeah, you know, let's do it, you know, in the first few meetings. But the strange thing about this, which I never knew, I indirectly met Rudy through the music business, of which I've been a part-time musician and whatnot for years. And so a gentleman that we both know introduced, hey, Rich, you know, Rudy Childs, Richard Fitz. And he looks at me and goes, are you related to the Fitz from Abington? I'm shaking his hand, looking at him, well, yeah, kind of. I'm his only son, yeah. So come to find out, Rudy, if you'd like to elaborate on the rest of it.
Well, my parents, who are in the back there.
And are longtime members of the Historical Society of Old Abington, yes.
They were friends with Richard's grandparents. So the Fitzes, Walter and Rosella. Through that connection, I always knew of Richard's story, his father. And so when the funeral happened in '90, they had a mass burial in Arlington Cemetery, and they put a stone up there. And so I lived in the DC area at the time, so I had a video camera, and I went down there and videotaped a little bit, and then I sent the tape to my parents, who then gave it to Walter and Rosella. And then after they passed away, Richard inherited all the memorabilia of his father. And when he came up to my office that night for our first meeting, you know, with the big thing of videotapes, I'm thinking, oh, this is one of those deals where he just wants all these videotapes on DVD, you know, I'm like, but it turned out we started talking and we figured out, you know, maybe there's a documentary in here. And I looked in the box and I'm like, well, I pulled out the tape that I'd sent up 25 years ago, and I said, it looks like I started working on this thing 25 years ago.
That's great.
So that's, that was
A little bit of karma coming through there.
One of the many stories that seem to come full circle for this, and you know, we say it all the time, there's definitely been a guiding force. And it's
Certainly an interconnection.
It's definitely creepy at times, but it's you can't deny it. Something's going on.
So you felt like you were led various times through the process.
Oh, many.
Absolutely.
Many times.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a story I've heard before, not from you guys, but
Yeah,
from
it's-
other people about other things going
Yeah.
on in their lives, and it's always fascinating to hear. So, you know, Rudy, you also brought other experience to the table. This wasn't the first documentary you've done, as I understand. And what sort of things had you been working on?
I had started producing videos, well, started shooting video in '84. And
Was that beta?
it was VHS, actually.
Okay.
I was not a beta man, but eventually I turned into a professional videographer in the 90s or late 80s and started shooting weddings, and I started shooting a boxing show for public access television, and I kept growing and growing, and then so I went on and did my boxing stuff for, it's been 30 years now, but I've got, you know, a huge collection of a library of professional boxing that I filmed, and I would do this when there were club boxing shows and there was no other cameras there. So I have another documentary in the process one day, but eventually things slowed down in my life and my business, where I stopped doing the weddings as much, and I started working on my own stuff. I wanted to do some stories about my past and my involvement in managing a rock and roll band. And so I did a documentary called 1984 Riding into Hell. And that's what Richard had gone to see that. And he saw what I was. So that was like my third documentary that I'd actually done. I did a couple other ones. They were all rock and roll. So when we decided to do this, it was like, this is stepping out of my safe zone a little bit.
Yeah, really.
No boxing and no rock and roll. And this particular project posed such a huge obstacle, because with Special Forces, there was no video, there's hardly any pictures, there's no government documents. It was really a very difficult one to attempt to produce. And
So you had to come at it from a different angle.
oh yeah, and
Okay.
so I decided, even as we worked on it, we really didn't share too much and tell people that, hey, yeah, I've got this new doc. You know, it was just, you know, I was kind of intimidated a little bit, I guess, until we started getting down to, we found reenactors that helped us produce segments of it that could visually help tell a story, because the only thing we had written documents were after action reports written by people that eyewitnessed what Richard Fitz went through.
Okay.
And so we were able to take those and then put them into the situation with the reenactors. At that point, I was already letting Richard direct it, and so you tell these guys what to do. So Richard's telling them how to set the whole thing. And I'm thinking, geez, that's not quite right. So I'd go over one of the reenactors, I'd say, you need to do this or that. He's like, looks at me like, who are you? You're not the director. Richard, what you tell him? So with all my years of experience.
Producers don't matter. That's what you're telling us. Yes. Directors have the power. Producers just produce.
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, it really, that's another interesting thing I'd like to bring up, was the fact that Richard directed this and I produced it. And when we first started, you know, I had all the knowledge about producing a video and directing it, so I started to try to do that. As I saw more and more of his story come out the way he needed to tell it, I figured out at some point I had to relinquish the title of director, and this is, you know, because I'd twist things around and say, okay, that's the way we're going to do it, and then by the time we'd edit it all untwisted, it
Didn't
go right
quite
back
work
to,
that way.
And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the way you gave it to me in the first place. So, but
A little
yeah,
strength of personality going on there.
yeah, so we went back and forth.
It
with
was
this.
difficult for both of us, because it was something that I've never done. All right, and I'm sure he kind of like scratches his head sometimes, because sometimes I relate it to writing a song, because you have to have certain flow and things, and sometimes
Structure.
we couldn't exactly go by a timeline, but there were some certain things that had to flow in a certain way that I felt, that it, once we got to that point, it was almost like I'd be like, can we just try it and just see it, and let's watch it and see what happens. And thankfully, he was, understanding enough to let me do that. Because it does two things. It either proves it right or wrong, or what's acceptable, what's better, and that's how we eventually ended up flowing together and making it happen.
But the talent that both of you have to bring to the table is to be objective enough to get
you
the
have to
finished
step up.
product
Yeah, you have to
that
step
you wanted
up.
to do.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I don't know the answer to the question. That's why I'm asking the question. Is this an Anywhere USA story, or is this very much focused in Abington?
Both.
Well, it is, yeah. I wanted to interject here because I was a little bit concerned about that and how it would be received outside the area.
Right.
So in March, we did go down to Maryland, and we played in a film festival, and it wasn't a finished product yet, but we actually came in out of over 100 films. We were the runner-up to the audience choice by one vote.
Wow.
And that's...
And again, that was unfinished.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I was cringing. I'm like, no, don't send it. No, it's unfinished. Don't do it.
It's not ready yet.
So it's I guess, yeah, it highlights Abington and it's Abington's heroes, but it transitions well to the rest of America.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just my father's story, but everybody, there's a few other people that we do mention in it. And the way we tell the story, you'll be quite surprised how it ties in. There is some kind of direct connection to my father's story, and it allows us to bring in, a lot more, Iraq, Afghanistan, 9/11, all this stuff that you'd be very taken back. Oh, wow. And that's exactly what it does. So it actually brings a lot more than just one conflict or war in the light, but at the same time it tells that human interest story about what these people and myself and my family went through.
Now, a difficult question to answer, or maybe not. You might have given it a lot of thought already, but how has this experience changed each of your lives by doing this? I mean, you can't begin a process like this and end a process like this, and I don't think you can be unchanged by it. So I'm just curious to know how personally it has affected each of you as you've gotten into this and told the story.
I'll take it first because I just want to say that what it's done for me, it's made me a better editor and producer because I felt that the 8 personalities that we both brought to the table had to find compromise, and in turn we both became better because anything we had to bring to the other person had to be of A caliber, and I think that's the result of my experience.
So playing off of each other that way,
Right.
and perhaps more normally your documentaries are more focused on what you are doing. Okay.
I'm doing producing and directing, and now my next project that I'm working on, I'm bringing him in as my executive
fun.
director.
You're creating a career for yourself, and you didn't intend to, perhaps. But
Well, maybe I did.
I'm
Who
jumping
knows?
ahead. I'm jumping ahead here. Okay.
Don't tell him.
And plus, he's going to do a little sound track
okay.
for me
Yeah,
too, which he did a
the music.
phenomenal.
Okay.
He did the music on this particular piece, and it's really, I think that helps drive the emotion.
He has music in his genes, so
Yes.
there you go.
Yep.
I happen to know.
Yeah,
You want to take a
absolutely.
stab at that one?
Well, how it affected me on a personal level?
Well, whatever level you want to
Well,
approach it on.
I think, in a way, when I decided to say that yes, I'm doing a documentary. All right. As I said earlier, there's stuff I had to learn, but at this point, I was already in contact with some special forces gentlemen. I had a gentleman that called me in the early '90s after the funeral, and it told me details about a mission that I was just blown away with. Come to find out, he was very close to my father. But when I decided to do this, I said, well, I have to set out and find some more info because there is so little. So I think it kind of kicked me in the butt a little bit and made me go find out stuff. So I had no choice. I said I was going to do it. Now I have to do it. That's for some reason how I work. If I say, even if I haven't started it, hey, I'm going to write a song. Hey, I just wrote a song. Well, I better go home and go write it. So point being is that it made me go out, and it gave me the drive to talk to the people, to ask the questions, and to just sit in rooms with these people. And I had already been in touch with the Special Operations Association. They have their reunions every year in Vegas. So I got to meet multiple people, and through this entire thing, just meeting people, now all of a sudden those people, they didn't even know I existed. So now all of a sudden I get people reaching out.
It's networking.
And then, yeah, but now I'm getting after action reports of missions that nobody ever knew my father was involved in. Nobody. And there are no, like you said, there are no records. So now all of a sudden I'm getting this information. One of these led to our second reenactment.
Okay.
You know, so there was another mission, it was a prisoner snatch mission in North Vietnam, and they were all supposed to be put in for Silver Stars. Never
happened.
One gentleman that is still alive got his for that mission. I was able to go down and interview him.
Nice.
And so we used a little reenactment footage for that particular mission. And there was another gentleman that I told you that called me. Took me years to find this guy. Finally found him, and I went out to South Dakota and interviewed him. And for 50 years, he had my father's South Vietnam airborne certificate.
Wow.
For 50 years,
Wow.
he kept it and gave it to me.
That's phenomenal.
50 years.
Yeah.
Well, also in that interview, there's a part where Krause tells Richard that the last time he saw his father, he was getting on that helicopter and he felt deprived that he wasn't able to go with that on that mission, that fateful mission.
The one he never came back from.
Right, and the last thing he told Richard Fitz was to bring back a souvenir, and he's sitting here on camera with Richard, and he says, "I see now that souvenir is you." It was, all this time, like 50 years later, that was the souvenir he was waiting for. So.
But and in saying that and telling that story, the United States really treated its returning Vietnam veterans, I'll say, poorly, and I don't think that's going to be disputed. No. We felt as a nation, I think, very awkward about that whole war, and it was widely protested and everything else. Giving veterans an opportunity to talk about the missions and everything sounds like it would be very cathartic for them. It's something that they've wanted to talk about for a long time, but maybe didn't find an audience that really wanted to hear about it or would appreciate it or would celebrate it.
Well, that's one with the in a regular unit and what they were doing. The Vietnam vets in a whole, yes, because they didn't feel like they wanted to talk about it because of the way they were looked at.
Right.
But in this case,
yeah, it gets deeper.
This is way deeper because this was, well, again, what they call a triple volunteer. You had the volunteer, my father was enlisted, volunteered for service, volunteered for Special Forces training, and had to volunteer for the Special Operations Unit. They signed documents that you have to remain secret. Nobody, you can't even talk about this for over 20 years.
No one can know what you've done.
So now you're adding this level on top of that. Of not only, but I'm gonna speak for them, but there's something about this unit that, although they know how some of the vets were treated, there's something different in this unit about it.
A different camaraderie because of the secrecy
about
and everything.
the way they feel about how they come back. They have these agreements, but it's not like. They still don't feel bad about it.
They also made a difference on a different level. I mean, they were more deeply involved in doing more covert things, and so they have a different. They take away from the whole war. They have a different takeaway because of what they did.
Yeah.
So that interject about that secrecy too. You have a close friend that perishes in that helicopter crash, and you can't even speak of that for a person.
Yeah.
And this is going on for decades.
Yeah.
And then finally, he's sitting down with Richard and telling him what happened. And you can almost see the weights just getting lifted off him.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's your buddy. I mean, in regular Army, they would, you could remember your friend. You could talk about your friend.
And I think also speaking to something you said earlier, how this ripples down through to present day, we've got to believe the same thing's happening in the world today, and there are people with stories that they can't tell,
Exactly.
that we won't hear for a good long time until someone makes a documentary about it.
This is exactly one of the reasons why I did this.
Okay.
There are, the question to me has been posed, well, what would you like people to get out of this? Well, there's, obviously we can tell the story now.
Right.
But also, we can fill in the pieces that, even just around here, when all that happened, there was a certain, amount that people would know in the local story. But man, there's so many people that didn't really know the entire story. And again, now I'm finding out even more missions,
Right.
in such a short time and what they
Right.
accomplished, etc. So when the question is posed, what do I want out of it? Simple. Now I get to tell the story, but again, it's cathartic for me. But as well, you just said that these type of units still exist.
Oh, God, yeah.
And we are creating stories just like mine.
Today.
Absolutely. So it may not take long. It may. There's things that you just don't know. When you're in that level, you don't know what's going to happen. But if something did happen, like myself, when you view this and you come out of this, you're going to understand that I could have been the most bitter person. I have friends tell me all the time, why aren't you so bitter? And it's completely opposite. And I want people to understand, even those kids that may have to go through this or the families, that you can come out of this on the other side of this and be proud. Be proud of what's going on. The general public doesn't really understand a lot of that mentality. And they're almost bitter for us, but they really don't get it.
How about local veterans? I mean, we have some very active veterans groups here in town, certainly in the South Shore in general, and have they been supportive and receptive and everything else in this? And, and
more than supportive.
And do you feel they have a different slant on it all because of their experiences?
No, actually, I think they're quite as proud.
Okay.
I think some of them, even a couple of them that we interviewed, kind of felt proud about what was going on.
Good.
It's good to tell it now, and and for years they didn't feel like they were. So it's just another platform for them to see something else come out.
Again, I think it's such an unusual attitude the country took towards the Vietnam War and to the returning vets that, I can't imagine it today, but it was then, and it was a different type of sentiment in the country. Okay, so you did a showing at a film festival of some sort when it wasn't complete. It's now complete. Talk to me about, have you shown the full thing yet? I know there's some upcoming showings that we want to hear about and that the audience wants to hear about, the cable audience wants to hear about, so they can get to see the whole thing. There's a showing coming up at the Abington Library. Is that next weekend? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
2 o'clock at the library.
On Glenowitz Way, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And we felt that it's a tough time a year for people that are involved with Veterans Day parades and things like that, or days off and stuff. So we decided we'd do several screenings around the area at different locations and different times. So we're actually going to do Abington at 2 o'clock, and then we're going to do South Shore Vo-Tech has a nice screening room, and we're going to do that Sunday.
That's at 3?
That's at 3.
Which I might be late.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm marching that day.
Okay.
So after 3 o'clock, we're going to do the South Shore Vo-Tech, and then Tuesday we're going to do the Quincy Library, the Thomas Crane Library, and that's at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then our final showing would be at Rockland High School at 6:30 on Thursday the 15th.
Okay.
So we just wanted to have a variety of screening areas, because we screened last year. We did a pre-screening, and what we were really looking for was feedback.
Sure.
And so we screened a very early version of it, and we got some tremendous feedback. Somebody came up to me and said, well, I don't understand how they found his body. And Richard had a 3-ring binder of pictures, the locations, maps, excavation, the relics that they found in the excavation, the bone fragments and all that. And I'm thinking, we didn't even include that.
Yeah.
I don't know how we missed that.
Yeah.
And so
But the feedback showed you.
helped us make that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, you can't see the trees through the forest type of thing.
Or forest for the
whatever.
trees, yes.
You just can't see it, you know?
Right.
And then,
Well, you're too
so
close to it at times.
Yeah, exactly right.
You need to be able to step back
Yep.
or have other people help you step back to say, well, what about? Okay,
Yep.
so, well, that was a good process then. So is Abington going to be the first screening?
Yeah.
Actually, we did the first final screening at Special Operations Association reunion in Vegas.
Seems
We
appropriate.
did that in
Okay.
October.
Okay.
And, you know, I had the president come up to me afterwards and say, you know, can I have a copy? We're going to try to help you and see what we can do to help you out with this. And, you know, we agreed that after the first of the year, we'll revisit it and see exactly what that means. You know?
Okay.
But either way, I know at one time they had asked me that when it's complete, that it be part of their living history project as well.
Sure.
So that's kind of neat. You know, that's nice to know. You know? Because we were able to piece a couple of missing things for them together. You know, so that was a nice little on my back. You know, it was nice to figure that out because again, you're dealing with memories that, you know, these gentlemen are in their 70s, you know, give or take, and they're dealing with missions that were going on, you know, back in the late 60s, early 70s, and you know, high stress levels, no records, no, you know, and so and a lot of these gentlemen were getting just rotated from team to team. What you may not understand is when these guys were, their casualty rate at the height of the Tet Offensive, 68-ish, that's when it started, the casualty rates were 110%. Every American that went on these missions was wounded, if not killed. And wounded went right back in. That's how they get more than 100% casualty rate. And not a problem, right back in.
That's what they did.
Right. So it's just crazy stuff. It really is. So
Interesting.
the next showing, we also tentatively just got a pretty cool thing happen to us. The Boston Globe reached out,
Oh, good.
and we may be doing a screening for them in Boston. I think the 28th.
Nice.
So we're still working out the details, and you know, so hopefully that will happen.
And the other aspect that comes out of something like this, comes out of this document, comes out of this project, I can personalize. The Ledger actually interviewed my late father some years back. He landed on Normandy Beach on D-Day, and to have, you know, on YouTube for me to be able to see my father for, you know, 5 or 10 minutes
Exactly.
talking about D-Day and his experiences is just
Yeah.
priceless. You know?
Exactly
So,
right. Yeah.
so you have created this not just for your family, but from the other people you've interviewed. It comes.
And that's kind of how it started. Like I said
Yeah.
earlier, I wanted to be able to have something to hand down.
Right.
And you know, I'll tell you what, there's only so much you can put in a DVD. And you know, I kind of came to realize that 3/4 through it, I'm like, you know, and everybody said you should write a book, and I got no patience or time for that, you know. But man, I'll tell you what, I think I really probably put the carriage in front of the horse because there's so many details that I found out that we had to leave out.
Right.
But at the same time, you want to break it down so the civilian population, everybody, you know, even local people can enjoy the story and understand it. Because if we sat there and made it all about facts and this and everything I found out,
It's not a story
you know,
anymore.
You know, it's
No,
it
it's not
really
a
isn't.
story. No.
So
It's
you know,
a recitation of facts.
That's something I had to learn through it.
Right.
You know,
Telling a story.
Right. Exactly.
By
So
all
it's,
means, which
you know,
any good documentary does, of course. And
Yes.
He only makes good documentaries, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, I've been chatting on here and asking my questions, which maybe they're the same questions you folks have had in your head, maybe not. So are there any specific questions from the audience at this point?
Can you again say the dates? Because you were saying the days and times, but not the dates of the screenings
Yes, it's the 10th
of November.
of November, 2 o'clock at the Abington Library. The next day, Sunday, the 11th, which is Veterans Day, will be at South Shore Votech at 3 o'clock. And then Tuesday, the 13th, is at the Crane Library at 7 o'clock in Quincy. And then we're coming back to Rockland on the 15th, a Thursday, at 6:30. So,
Thank you.
And I have some some copies of those dates in my van if anybody
we've
wants some
got some
handouts. I have some. I
postcards
gotta run out and get them.
that say
If you want them.
And we actually have little flyers. We're trying to get them in some of the windows. I know it's a little late in the game to put them up in some storefronts, but if anyone has something in mind where they could hang it, that people would see it.
If it's on
We have some
Facebook,
extras.
that reaches, well, Life
Yeah,
in
well,
Abington on Facebook reaches most of the time.
Sometimes it's old school method of just walking in the Bemis and there it is.
I
and that's what
agree.
you see,
I agree.
you know.
The schools also use constant comment? Contact, okay.
Constant contact? What's
Constant
that?
contact. It's
Never heard
something that goes out to all the students through the superintendent's office. And
Oh, really?
I know people who are involved in that, so I might be able to help with that.
And just
So-
the other thing is, I know there's a new generation that we're dealing with all the media and stuff like that. But you know, when I approach some younger people, they just have never heard. They don't even recognize the name Richard Fitz. And I feel that that's why it's important that we have this documentary. But I also, the other night, we were out and I saw somebody, and they were a little older, and I handed them a card for the movie showing, and she started to cry.
Yeah.
She knew Richard.
Yeah.
And so it's,
It was personal.
yeah.
Yeah. It's-
But it's, you know, it's the amount of people that I've met. It blows my mind to this day how personal it was for not only across the country, but I literally have been getting still to this day these bracelets in the mail from not only across the country, but from the whole wide world.
Well, we have one right
It's
here in
crazy.
the library,
You
so
know, and to this day,
we've had one here as long as I've known
I had one from
the
Italy, I
dialogue.
had one from Australia.
Yeah.
Unreal. You know, it's just crazy.
It's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to
Yeah.
the world gets smaller, but that
It sure
works
does.
both ways.
It does, yep.
And sometimes it's a good thing. You folks also you have DVDs. Are you selling the documentary at this point, or is that premature? You will sell it
No,
someday,
actually,
or what are you doing?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
I think that where we're at with the whole project is we were trying to apply for some funding to distribute.
Sure.
We were contacted by a distributor already, and he wanted us to fast track it to closed caption, put the commercials in it, and get it up on, you know, several networks on cable. But we decided to take a step back and say we want to do a grassroots approach, which we would come around and make events out of it and,
Sure.
and show it to people. What happens when we put it on the airwaves is it just, a lot of the film festivals will not be interested in it.
Because it's gone
already-
commercial.
It's already aired.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
we decided to take a year and take our time and then get it out there. But we are working towards getting some funding to do that, you know, to
make
put it in the
some,
film festivals.
Yeah.
It actually costs money.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, and some of the smaller ones, the fees are smaller, and when you get into the larger ones, Sundance and all the ones everyone's heard of, it could be several $100 just for them to look at it
Right.
and either say yay or nay. So that's the dice we want to roll, we want to try, but you know where we're at with the whole thing, applying for some of this financing, we figured out between the two of us, we've spent over $10,000 just, and that's not counting the amount of time in editing
Right.
in hours.
Right.
That's just
And
adding
time
up-
off work.
That's adding up just, you know, the flights, the
Yeah.
The hard
graphics.
expenses.
Yeah, the hard expenses.
Right,
So
right.
it's lucky for me, I have all the equipment. Richard has all the equipment to do the sound. And we basically volunteered all of our efforts. Now, at this point, it's like, okay, we got to have some help. So now we're going to these organizations and saying, we've got a finished product now.
Right.
The only thing we want to do is help distribute. So that's kind of where we're at with the whole thing.
Okay.
And another way to look at it, when we stepped back and said, you know, let's hold off on the immediate, you know, fast track of the distribution. It's a nice tool to be able to have in our pocket to kind of help with some organizations, veterans and whatnot, and maybe do some screenings that would involve charity events. You know, it's another way to get it out there. I have some interest now that, you know, hopefully that it might start going to different chapters throughout the country and doing screenings and stuff like that. That way we can raise some money and give it back.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well-
and we have to cover our expenses too.
This-
Right, that's
But,
why we did the free screens too.
Sure.
We're not trying to
you know,
take advantage.
it's not what it's about.
No.
No, you don't want to tell a story
We
about
want to get the message
anything
out.
to do with a veteran or anything, and personally, my family, to make money. You know, that wasn't the whole idea.
No, understand.
You know, but to take a next step, you gotta have it.
It's,
You know what I
there's
mean?
got to be something
Yeah.
to get the distribution going.
Yeah.
That makes sense perfectly, absolutely. Yeah,
Oh, I was gonna say, do you guys have a GoFundMe page?
We do, we do. If anybody's interested, they can go to GoFundMe, 21 Years of Folded Flag. You can donate through there, or write directly to the Rockland Trust in Abington on Center Ave.
okay. And our program today, of course, will be up on YouTube as well, so that might be
Nice.
useful to you at some point, talking about the making of and the background of, so that's cool too. I know you brought the DVD, and we have a bit of it here in our laptop computer here.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how, what.
We were just showing a little bit before
Okay.
as everyone was seated. We don't have the proper audio amplification.
Okay.
Richard's very concerned about that because he did
He did the
music.
sound.
He did the sound and everything.
Okay.
He really did an amazing job with the sound. So.
Okay.
But we do, want to show a little bit about if anyone wasn't here earlier when we were playing it. So we were just going to show a little bit. Now,
Okay.
see if I can pull that up.
Sure.
And
We can talk about a couple of the pieces that you see.
Certainly.
You might not be able to hear it well, but but we can describe what's going on.
I might need to get you to do a password.
oh, see, our security here is so high that I need to.
Let me guess,
enter-
it's password.
I tell ya. Like magic. There we go. I know the password. They don't tell you, but when you take over the presidency of the Historical Society of Old Abington, you get your own alarm code for the building and your own key and passwords. So, I mean, boy, that's about what you get, by the way, but that's still significant. So,
Don't forget the responsibility.
yeah, well, no one ever wants to talk about that. I had put it on mute, so.
Yep, gotcha. You got all that stuff there. And this is a letter home from Richard. And if you want to just narrate a little bit what we got going
Yeah,
on.
to clarify, this letter was from my father, sent home. And of course, you can't really hear it here, but the letter,
Was recorded on a,
it was probably one of the first reel-to-reels ever available. And if anybody's had any experience with, especially the older ones, the sound is like horrible.
Bad.
So, I mean, chipmunky, it's pitchy, it's, now fast forward a cassette tape that's been laying around for 30 plus years. So somebody had converted this letter, he sent it home with the writing, and he actually recorded his voice when he sent it home.
and he sent the Green Beret home.
Sent his Green Beret home to his father on Father's Day.
And
But the thing was that we have his actual voice.
That's great.
And let me tell you, it took a lot of sound work. And what the final product was simply amazing. I had a couple of friends that I know work with me on this. And, this probably is, there are a few emotional rides on this movie. But this is one of the pinnacles, and it kind of sets up the rest of it. But it kind of opens your eyes about almost what he knows might happen, in a way. And, reached out in the only way he knew to get close to his father.
Now, you mentioned the percentages before. Do you think the people in the thick of it understood those percentages?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
So this was his legacy.
pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why there's a lot of emphasis put on the beret itself
Mm-hmm.
throughout the story, and towards the end. Because it explains a lot about who he was and what he thought about it. what it meant to them. You know?
And some of the footage that you're seeing there is actually from a special operations soldier that allowed us to use his footage.
Oh, wow.
And the helicopter footage, especially the stuff we did on the ground with the reenactors, was something we shot, but the getting actual footage from the
He was kind enough, he's been holding on to this footage for many, many years. Some of it was used in the History Channel for a couple of things that they'd already done. But he, just because he knew who I was, he didn't, you know, we were thinking about buying it and this and that, and I even asked him about it, how much it would be and this and that. I'll get back to you. A week later, he said, here you go.
Nice.
You know, just give me credit, that's all I want, to make sure the History Channel doesn't try to get it. And if they do, it's $10,000 for 3 minutes. I said, okay, you got it. So, but I mean, there was a lot of these guys that kind of stepped up and went out of their comfort zone. Not only to answer questions, but you know, just to step up and be interviewed. You know, one of the biggest things on this was I actually met a gentleman who eyewitnessed my father's demise.
Oh, wow.
First time I ever met him, and he was explaining exactly what happened to me as I was interviewing him. It was the first time I ever heard of any of this. And we have it on camera, and he was kind enough to do that. So you can imagine the emotional roller coaster that some of these gentlemen went through just by talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Here you are, about 7 years old, or 5?
Looks younger than that to me.
Yeah, he's definitely younger. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
So we were able to locate home footage. We had an enormous amount of old articles that we scanned in, just massive amounts of material to sort through.
And less than half that I have that you've scanned.
Yeah, and here's the telegram that came in that said the presumption of death. So, yeah, we have.
Is there a little bit of the handwritten letter home for the mission?
I think that was it there.
The one where we kind of pop it up in the graphics.
Yep. So yeah, what happened was we had these letters, and after we interviewed Kraus in South Dakota, his story, we were listening to a story, but we also started reading these letters, and he was talking about the same mission that Richard had written home. Now, realize that he cannot.
This is the certificate he had for 50 years.
He could not write specific details home because that was not allowed.
Right.
So when we were able to decipher, it was pretty much right in line with how Kraus
so
told
we were
us.
able to use some reenactment, his interview, and some of the letter to go through one of the missions, which is he's talking about now. And you know, through all this, like I said, there's medals that my father was supposed to have that he didn't get. So he has a Purple Heart. He has with an oak leaf cluster, which means he was wounded twice. But the mission that he's talking about here, my father was supposed to have another Bronze Star. My father had a Bronze Star, Purple Heart cluster. This one he's supposed to have a Bronze Star, so that's 2 Bronze Stars, which more than likely would be a V device. And the other mission I spoke of earlier, which was the prisoner snatch. They went in and they kidnapped 3 NVA soldiers right out of the camp, and they were supposed to get Silver Stars for that.
See, a lot of what these guys did, they didn't engage a lot. They were all sneaking around behind the enemy lines, and they were taking the pictures, and they were counting, and they would go in for prisoner snatches. Yes. But right now, in this particular mission, they're setting up an ambush just in case. Now we're seeing the...
This is an actual letter in his handwriting that describes the mission that we're reenacting and having the gentleman narrate for us. Recall, I should say. This gentleman was a very good friend of my father's, was in training with him, went overseas with him, and volunteered for SOG training with him, and was on his regular team with him. And so this was a gentleman that was a gold mine for me.
Amazing. Well, so we'll be able to see the entire film next
Yep.
week.
Yep.
Okay, and again, the time at the Abington Public Library is the Saturday showing at 2 o'clock.
I suggest get there early because it's
They have limited seating.
I
They've
think
already
they're going to be.
announced.
Well,
Yeah.
we got Rolling Thunder coming in from Vermont, New Hampshire, and everything else. So
Okay.
it might be a little tight, which is yet another reason we're doing a few, you
Absolutely.
know, just in
Good.
case.
Well, any other questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So the medals that your father was supposed to get but didn't, is there a way, I don't know anything about this, that you can apply?
Well, funny, neither did I. Until I started talking to the gentleman that went on the Silver Star mission with him. That is kind of, at the moment, we've kind of put it on the side burner. But he and I had talked about getting back together and having him fill out the proper paperwork. When we discuss it here on the DVD, we are actually going by after-action eyewitness reports that were sent to me. Probably, I'm going to say 5 years ago. That's when I found out about it. So all that information is from at the time, the major that was in charge, and these gentlemen eyewitness, and they all eyewitnessed a general that had made this statement. So from here, it's really just a matter of filling out the paperwork and going through the red tape bureaucracy of getting it done. We have an easier shot at it because one guy already received it. And we have the eyewitness reports. So
The precedent is
one
there.
thing at a time.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
we also have a display of some of the medals
Yeah, some.
if you want to come up
If I was
afterwards
going
and
to
see.
explain what some of these are, in my case, when I say the Purple Heart, you'll see obviously the Purple Heart, and it's got a little obliques.
Careful.
That means, you know, instead of getting 2 medals, that'd be the second time you were wounded. And the Bronze Star was for the mission that he was killed on. But yet, there's a mission before that he writes home in the letter, in his words, saying the general said all Bronze Stars for his team. Then I have the prisoner snatch mission, which was supposed to be all Silver Stars. And these guys didn't do it for the medals, you know? And some of these guys are receiving medals to this day, you know? And so that's some of their mission now, is to try to get the awards that some of these guys were deserved. You know, and that's kind of how all that started, with the after-action reports and with me sticking my face in there and meeting people. Now it gave some of these guys that remembered what was supposed to happen an outlet, and that's why I got sent the eyewitness action reports.
So the people that were with him, like this Krausen person, they are beyond the 20 years, they can't get in any trouble for telling you
Correct.
exactly what happened.
Correct.
And,
Yep.
and they have been?
Technically, it was 2001, I believe. The entire unit was finally declassified. And they were actually given an entire unit citation, presidential citation, which is equivalent to the Distinguished Service Cross for the whole unit.
And some of them have written some books that are
Oh, yeah.
just
Yep.
unbelievable.
And the most Medal of Honor earnings in any unit ever
During Vietnam?
in this unit. Yeah.
Yeah. When I first undertook this, I took some of the books and I started reading them, and I was just to kind of grasp what we were getting involved in, and I was just blown away. And we mentioned some of the books in there, and some of the guys that wrote the books are part of we interviewed some of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Cross the Fences was one, Plasters was
Yeah.
SOG, the Secret War.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that I never even knew that my father's name was in.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Do you know what made your father choose the Green Beret?
It's in the movie, actually.
Oh,
It really is. Yeah.
I won't.
No,
No, it's fine. It's fine. It sparked interest with him, to believe it or not, when he saw the JFK funeral on TV, and one side of the casket was flashed some Green Berets, and the announcer, whoever at the newscast, was explaining that it was a new top secret outfit that JFK had put his power behind, and were being trained at Fort Bragg, etc. And that they're highly advanced or whatever, and all these weird skill sets. I don't know what exactly was going on or being said, but it triggered something in my father. Excitement, that sounds like.
And he told his father at that point.
Yeah.
That he goes, I'm gonna be.
He said, I'm gonna wear that someday. And it says it in the DVD. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. You're a kid, blah blah blah. Sure enough.
But he did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you both. And thank you for sharing the experience. And we have a refreshment hour time in the back room now. And if you'd like to ask additional questions, I suspect our guests will stick around a little longer. There's some displays up front to be seen. And mark your calendars for the upcoming screenings. And we hope to see all of you back here the first Sunday in December to join our next conversation about St. Bridget Church. So again, thank you all for coming. We'll catch up with you in the back room, and we also have a membership table in the back. If you're interested in joining or signing up for anything, please do so. So it's been a great program.
Well,
thank you both.
Appreciate it.
Excellent.
Thank you.